Howdy, boys and girls, and welcome back. It is week 10 of the college football season. I am mostly recovered and excited because I'm going to a game in Columbus this weekend. I don't know what Carla's football watching plans are this weekend, but we're going to find out because I'm going to ask her, hey, Carla.
Hey,
what are your football watching plans for this weekend?
To watch a whole lot of it. From at home on my couch, and it's nice to see you back on. I was gonna say back to the dark side, which actually is kind of literal this week.
It's a blackout game. We're playing Nebraska. It's a blackout game, but it's at noon, which strikes me as odd. But okay, I mean, I am pliable. I am suggestible, and I am the guy that Ohio State wants to sell black merchandise to every single year, and I comply willingly. So let's do it. Why not?
Welcome back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's gonna be a fun stretch run here and for November. Black beer, even check it out. I'm totally on board.
We've done a complete 180 from last week.
I was wearing black last week actually, and the crew did win. Although, as it turned out, Montreal lost badly, so the crew didn't actually need to win. But they beat Minnesota, advanced. We're taping on a Tuesday night, so on Thursday they play a knockout round match in the first round of the MLS playoffs. So I will be watching that. That will be a brief break. Actually, that's going to be tricky because Ohio University is also playing football at the same time. I'm going to need a couple screens there.
You're going to need a double screen and an iPad or something.
Yeah. It just happens. It happens this time of year.
One more year, I can say go Crew until Nashville gets our MLS team, which is coming.
And we'll be happy to.
So go Crew for at least one more year.
Thank you. I appreciate that. As we do, things are getting serious when we get to the point where we switch at the Carla and Crappy Show, because everybody else switches, from the Associated Press rankings to the college football playoff rankings, which just, as I mentioned, it is Tuesday night. And I don't know how much you got to see. I watched the whole special where they announced the initial rankings. So instead of our just one thing, we're going to take a look and just kind of offer our initial impressions. And Carla, I'll let you do the honors. Who's in our if the Final Four were held this weekend, who would be there?
Sure. So I will fully admit that I did not see any of the show. I read the rankings, and actually that I think that's a good thing. I like having my own thoughts before I hear what anybody else has had to say. And I got home from campus early or a little later than usual, so I missed the whole thing. But okay. So if the playoffs were to start today, your 1 seed is Bama, 2 is Clemson, 3 LSU, 4 Notre Dame. I know. And then 5 and 6, first 2 teams out are Michigan and Georgia, respectively.
Yep.
If you want to go a little further down the list, Oklahoma is sitting at 7, and Washington State, Wazoo, is sitting at 8. Go Cougs.
Sure.
That's for your. So
what you think?
Yeah,
get it right.
I think so. I don't really have a lot to quibble about looking at this right now. I can see that there would probably be a lot of debate as to Notre Dame being at 4, LSU being at 3. LSU has a loss. Notre Dame does not. I can see that possibly being a point of contention here. My argument there would be hello, strength of schedule. LSU just blows everybody out of the water at this point with strength of schedule. And so I am perfectly fine having them at 3. Also, as the dear God, please someone beat Notre Dame already. I'm really happy to see Notre Dame sitting at 4 because that means that there might actually be a possibility that if Notre Dame loses a game, they don't make the playoff.
Right.
So selfish reasons, I like seeing Notre Dame at 4, but from logical, like actual football reasons, I totally understand why they're at 4. Michigan,
and I think if I may interrupt, I think sure. I don't think that's wishful thinking. I think Notre Dame's schedule, I mean, it looked exceptional at the beginning of the season.
Right.
But as it's played out, no fault of their own, but as it's played out, it is not what it looked to be. I think, even though they're in the initial ranking, Notre Dame needs to win out to get there, which kind of goes against everything that we've talked about
Yeah.
And certainly, if they do win out, they're there. There's no question in my mind. But I think their schedule is sketchy enough that they have to be undefeated to make it into the Final Four at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, and that's a great point because, you're sitting here looking and saying, okay, if Michigan runs the table and their only loss to the year is Notre Dame, you can make the argument that Notre Dame goes because, Notre Dame was unbeaten unless Notre Dame has a loss, and then you put Michigan in. The bigger argument comes when you start talking about Georgia and Oklahoma, I think. Because if Georgia's only loss is to LSU, that means they beat Alabama. Mm-hmm. And to me, that supersedes anything Notre Dame has done.
Right. Yeah. No question.
Alabama, I think a one-loss Georgia team winning the SEC championship game gets in. Oklahoma, the Big 12 has been interesting this year, and you've got, if you look at it, you've got some pretty decent Big 12 representation in the playoff ranking top 25. If Oklahoma runs the table and finishes with just that one loss to Texas, do they have a better strength of schedule than Notre Dame has? That's an interesting argument to get into. It'll be real interesting to see how this all plays out. Even if Notre Dame finishes undefeated, does the weakness of its schedule kind of play against it in this case? That'll be an interesting debate for the committee.
That could be, and I do go back to our original premise of the "Oh God, could somebody please beat Notre Dame" segment. That because Notre Dame is Notre Dame. I'm confident that if they finish undefeated, they're going to get a spot. And it's frustrating because I'm not sure that they're even if they get to that point, I'm not sure they're going to be one of the best 4 teams in college football. But that's where you look at TV rankings. That's where you look at butts in seats for bowl games. Notre Dame's going to be there. If they're undefeated, Notre Dame's going to be there. My thing, because my myopic view of college football, it centers on one team in my universe. Ohio State is in 10th place in the initial ranking. I'm good with that. Generally, I think, in spite of how awful the loss at Purdue was, it's okay. To say I'm comfortable with my position assumes that Ohio State has none of the on-field problems that we've talked about already. Right. Because right now, if this Ohio State team makes it to the college playoff, they're going to get waxed. That's the fact. If I'm looking down the road and hoping for improvement, however, I like the position I'm in. Michigan, no question, is in a better spot. Michigan's loss was to a better team. Right. Michigan's loss was in the first weekend of the season. But I think if stuff plays out kind of like you would expect it to, I would think if Michigan or Ohio State wins the Big Ten East, either one of those teams are going to be in. And some of that has to do with the same thing that Notre Dame benefits from. TV ratings, butts and seats. That's both of those teams accomplish the same thing that Notre Dame does. And I acknowledge that Ohio State gets those benefits as well.
Yeah. The one thing that's a little bit interesting to me as I was looking a little bit further down, Florida at 11 is really interesting because you have a 2-loss Florida team above UCF, which is undefeated, group of 5. I'm happy to see the Knights there. Yes. It's nice to see a group of 5 team. That's the highest the group of 5 team has ever entered the college football playoff rankings. So kudos to them. But West Virginia is sitting at number 13. And I find it really interesting that the committee decided to put Florida ahead of West Virginia. West Virginia only has 1 loss at Iowa State. We've talked about how ridiculous Ames is to play. That's a little to me. I still think I would put a 1-loss West Virginia team over a 2-loss Florida team at this point, because even their schedule is kind of, there's not a lot of topsy-turvy there. So I don't know, that it'll sort itself out, but I thought that was interesting for a first.
Is that commentary on Big 12 versus SEC?
It might be.
Even the SEC East, which generally is not the the same competition the SEC West is.
Especially because Florida was not impressed, and we've seen the committee in the past kind of act responsively to the immediate action. So it's very interesting that you see Florida at 11 after essentially getting waxed by Georgia on a neutral site. Whereas West Virginia, they lost at Ames, but they just steamrolled Baylor last week. And so it's really interesting that the committee still felt that Florida was 2 notches above a West Virginia team. I'm not sure that's true, but again, maybe the committee's acting a little differently this year. We'll find out next week when we have something to compare it to. But it's interesting how the committee changes every year, even though the members are kind of the same. Just how do they respond to things? How do they respond to big wins, kind of overpowering losses, and what's the flux within the rankings next week, depending on how things shake out. And this is a huge week of college football, which we're going to get to.
Yes.
We will see how the committee responds to kind of some of these immediate reaction kind of things.
The wild card that I will get to, and this is the thing that Ohio State fans need to be worried about, would be LSU beating Alabama this weekend.
Yeah.
I don't think Alabama is so much better than everyone else right now, at least as it appears. Unless they somehow end up, they'd probably have to have 3 losses. Or Nick Saban would have to axe murder somebody like on national television and go to jail. I think that's the only way that Alabama doesn't make the playoff. But if LSU were to beat Alabama on Saturday, then we're looking at a deal where the committee sort of has to put 2 SEC teams in.
Right.
That would make it tough for everyone else. Particularly for a team like Ohio State that has 1 loss and 1 loss kind of late-ish in the season. There's a trivia thing about LSU though, and I don't want to get into this game too much because this is one of the games we're talking about this weekend. I learned this tonight watching the show on ESPN. No team ranked 3rd in the initial college football playoff ranking has ever made it to the Final Four. Has not happened. So keep that in mind as we get to that game. We will start with what we're hoping to make we're going to make this a regular thing for the rest of the season. Oh God, could somebody please beat Notre Dame already? The Irish are at Northwestern, and this one is actually interesting, given the Notre Dame is favored by 9.5 points. I'm going with a maybe.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am on this game.
Okay.
Because, I mean, Northwestern is kind of one of those teams that is just like one of the most baffling in all of college football this year.
Yes.
Because they have losses to Akron and Duke, but then they went out and, I mean, they just handled Wisconsin last week, which was
they thumped Wisconsin. No doubt about it.
And true, Hornibrook didn't play, and that's a big deal. But they forced Jonathan Taylor into a couple of fumbles, and I mean they dominated that game from start to finish. So suddenly you have Northwestern, who is in the driver's seat in the Big Ten West, which who knew?
I know.
It's just one of those weird things. So Notre Dame on the road at Northwestern. This is a maybe. This is keep an eye on this one, just on the fringes. Because here's the thing. Northwestern, and this is really pathetic and tells a lot about Notre Dame's strength of schedule this year.
Yes.
Northwestern is ranked 50th in the country in total defense, and it's still the best defense that the Irish have faced since week 1 against Michigan.
Oh, man, this is what I'm saying about Notre Dame. Come on.
It's terrible, but they're facing a legitimate defense in Northwestern. It'll be really interesting to see how they handle that on the road. Pat Fitzgerald has this team trending up at exactly the right time.
It does.
They had that weird 3-loss thing, kind of at like weeks 2, 3, and 4 of the season. Everyone's like, oh, Northwestern's done. They are trending up. This team has confidence. They just went out and beat Northwestern. Now they got Notre Dame at home, and they know they can play spoiler. Keep an eye on this one. Maybe. Fingers crossed. Pat Fitzgerald is a good coach, and the team is headed the right direction. And if you want to see Notre Dame lose as badly as I do, this could be the week. Notre Dame has left Florida State at home. Did you see that game last weekend? Yeah. Number 19 Syracuse, which is also intriguing now.
but also in South Bend. and then SC out in Southern California to finish the season.
I love
who knows what game you get from the Trojans. So if you want to see Notre Dame win or lose,
this might be it.
Sure hard this weekend. Hard this weekend. We have 4 actual games to talk about because there's a lot of fun stuff going on this weekend. We're going to start with to make sure you guys understand, from this point forward, we are using the college football playoff rankings rather than the AP rankings that we've been using for the season to this point. So just keep that in mind. Number 6, Georgia at number 9, Kentucky. Georgia is favored by 9.5 points. What do you think?
Just as we all predicted, the SEC East title goes through Lexington, Kentucky.
Who wouldn't have thought that?
Right? It's just been a wacky college football season. I am thrilled for Kentucky to be sitting in this spot.
Absolutely.
It's a great story. They're having a heck of a season. Here's the thing that troubles me about Kentucky entering this game. Yes, they're playing at home, and that's a big deal. That they're not playing this game in Athens, where I think the 9-point line would be accurate if it was in Athens.
I agree.
What bothers me about Kentucky is the way that the team is trending. Just like we said, Northwestern is trending up. Kentucky is actually trending down a little bit since the loss to Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. Kentucky had to eke past Vandy 14-7. And Vandy's not a great football team. Having watched them in person, they're okay, but that's the game that you should win if you are an SEC East champion level team. You should beat Vandy by more than 7 points. And last week against Missouri, that was a win that probably shouldn't have been a win. Because if you watch the very end of that game, and for whatever reason I caught the very end of that game, I don't remember why, but I caught the last couple plays of that game. Kentucky won that game on an untimed down.
Right.
On the last play of the game that was given to the Wildcats because of a pass interference call in the end zone on the last play of regulation that was questionable at best.
Little iffy.
So to say that Kentucky has eked out its last 2 wins might be an understatement after losing to Texas A&M. That troubles me heading into this game, that we haven't seen a lot out of this Kentucky offense for the last 3 games.
Sure.
Really. Georgia, on the other hand, yes, they got stumbled up by LSU, and LSU baffled them, but man, did they come back this week. Welcome back, Jake Fromm. Things look, perfectly normal. I think offensively they're going to be fine against this Kentucky team. The big thing here is, can the Georgia defense stop Benny Snell? Georgia is, and here's the one glimmer of hope for Kentucky, is that Georgia's 43rd in rush defense. They've been giving up about 140 yards per game, but that number gets worse if you look at just neutral site and away games. They drop all the way to 59th in games they are not playing at home, between the hedges there in Athens. So that might give you a little bit of hope if you're a Kentucky fan. Kentucky's going to play up. They're going to be excited. This is a position they're not used to being in. I think they'll keep it close, but I still think Georgia's the better team on paper. I think Georgia's going to find a way to win this game. But I hope the game is competitive. I hope that the Wildcats can make it interesting, just because, like I said, I'm really happy that they're in this position, and that, we've got somebody other than Florida and Georgia duking it out for a SEC title. Okay.
You reference this. I think in Lexington, this line is dumb. If it's in Athens, it might not be quite enough. But I think this is a tighter game than 9.5 points. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is probably the biggest home game in the history of Kentucky football.
It might be, yeah.
I am not, granted, I am not familiar with, intimately familiar with the history of Kentucky football, but I'm reasonably sure that in recent memory, there has not been a game this big in Lexington in a very long time. I do get why the Bulldogs are favored, and man, they look solid against Florida last weekend. So that was a nice way to rebound against the from the loss. Here's the thing: I'm looking at the numbers. numbers do not lie. Kentucky's defense I think, is good enough to slow down Georgia's offense. Jake Fromm seemed like he rebounded as well personally in the game last weekend. But Kentucky's got a solid pass rush, and they've been really, really good against the passing offense as well. So they're better than Georgia's defense in both in points allowed and in yardage allowed. And then what I'm hoping for, and this is maybe a little stretch, but what I'm hoping for is that UK's rushing game is good enough to keep Georgia's offense off the field. You're correct in that Kentucky's offense has not looked as good the past couple of weeks as it did at the outset of the season. It does not look as good as the team that beat Florida early in the season. But man, I think the combination of those two things, rushing game, control the ball, control the clock, a really, really good defense. And then the fact that you're at home and you are playing a monumental game in the history of your football program, and that feels like a Kentucky win to me. So that's what I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick the Wildcats here. We mentioned this earlier briefly. Number 13 West Virginia at number 17 Texas. Texas is favored by little teeny 2 points.
Yeah.
At home. What do you think?
Well, I even saw 1.5, which is like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Toss the coin. Two teams that are really, really interesting, and I love how big this weekend is because we're going to really see some separation here, I think, in a bunch of different conferences. West Virginia, we talked about this earlier in the show about, the whole Ames thing and losing there and, what's going on with the Mountaineers. I think everything's fine for West Virginia. If you saw anything at all of that, of the Baylor game, which probably a lot of people didn't because they played that game on Thursday night. So we were all distracted by Maction or whatever else was going on Thursday night. Will Greer and the West Virginia offense put up 31 points in the second quarter against Baylor and just steamrolled the Bears. So offensively, West Virginia is fine. So it's kind of an interesting question here as to whether this Texas defense is up to the challenge of keeping up with this West Virginia offense. Now we've seen the Texas defense play really, really well, particularly thinking about the Red River shootout. And I'm going to call it a shootout because that's exactly what that game was. So we've seen the Texas defense be able to do this. But can they do it again? Now they're playing at home, which is a big deal. Both teams are pass first, run second. In fact, it's actually really funny. If you go back and you look at the box score from West Virginia's game last week, West Virginia's leading rusher was Tevin Bush, who had 79 yards on one carry, which is probably one of the best stat lines ever. Lead the team in rushing on one handoff. And the other thing I was looking at was defense because both of these offenses, have the potential to be pretty prolific.
Yes.
West Virginia's pass defense ranks a little bit higher than Texas's. So if you're looking at two teams that are pretty evenly numbers wise, that might be the differentiating factor here. I said this before the Mountaineers lost in Ames that I felt like Will Greer came back this year because he was on a mission to win a Big 12 title. Mm-hmm. I still think that's the case. Mm-hmm. I think West Virginia is coming into this game exceptionally motivated, wanting to make a big statement. They haven't had the opportunity yet to make a statement on the national stage. They haven't had a game that is like this, this kind of spotlight position. Now, unfortunately, it's right up at the same time as Georgia, Kentucky. So have your thumbs ready. You're going to be flipping back and forth between these two games, or just get a second screen. I highly advise that. It's way more fun when you got a game on the TV and a game on the iPad. It's great. Yep. But I think Will Greer has the experience in this situation to know that this is the first time his team is going to take the national spotlight and be able to find a way for this West Virginia team to get a win. I think this game is super close. The line is fun because Texas could very easily win this game. We both predicted that Oklahoma would win the shootout and then, Texas just kind of did some really silly things and won the game. That I think that could definitely still happen in this game, but I don't know. I think West Virginia seems to be playing with a lot of passion, a lot of purpose. They absolutely destroyed Baylor last week. I think it's going to be really interesting, but I'm going to edge Mountaineers in this one, but keep this one close by on the thumb finger on your remote, because this is going to be a fun one.
My thumb finger will be driving me and my tailgate party home from Columbus when this one starts.
Right.
But I'll be able to see the end. You spoke for a surprising amount of time about defense, and I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of it in this game. Texas did have an exceptional defensive effort against Oklahoma in the Red River shootout, but they still gave up a ton of points.
Yeah, they did.
And both teams are giving up more than 350 yards per game.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, West Virginia's defense is better,
right,
than that of the Longhorns. But look, that's why this is going to be a fun game to watch. AJ, I hope you're paying attention. Texas is capable of being really good. We mentioned Oklahoma, Oklahoma, as good as they have been, they gave Oklahoma the only loss of the year, but they can also lose to an iffy kind of Oklahoma State team, as they did last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I thought initially that WVU might be the best team in the Big 12, and then the loss at Iowa State, there's some doubts there. However, I still think West Virginia in a league that is about offense, I still feel like West Virginia could be the team to beat in the Big 12. Oklahoma is way ahead of them in the playoff standings, and I get that. But if we're going to have a shootout in Austin on Saturday, which is sort of what I'm expecting, I think this decision becomes a lot easier. I think you go with Will Grier, who was used to that kind of game, and his 25 touchdowns that he has so far in the season.
Right.
I'm picking West Virginia here. Next up, we have your Penn State Nittany Lions. They are ranked 14th in the college playoff rankings at, we have mentioned before, number 5, Michigan. Michigan is favored by 10. What do you think?
Yeah. So I don't want to spend a ton of time breaking this game down, because Michigan statistically owns every category in this matchup, and they're playing at home. Mm-hmm. I don't have a ton of faith that Penn State can win this game, but I am a Penn State fan, so I'm looking for the silver lining here to figure out what can happen here. So that's kind of the way that I looked at this game. As I watched the end of that Nittany Lions game against Iowa on Saturday, and the game that you were very confident about, there's 2 minutes left to play in the game, and Iowa has the football, and I say, "Dear God, you're going to do it all over again," right? And I actually tweeted, with about a minute or so left to play in the game, that Nick Scott may have just saved Penn State's season with that goal line interception, which was just a terrible decision making on the Hawkeyes offensively. But thank God that Nick Scott was standing there and was able to intercept that football, because I honestly thought, because Iowa was going to win the football game on that drive. And the crazy thing is they still had another shot to do it.
Yes. Yes.
And so this is a Penn State team that you're kind of going, okay, so they lost to Ohio State and they lost to Michigan State, and then they had to edge out Indiana and they had to edge out Iowa, and now they're going to Ann Arbor, and it just really doesn't feel all that good. What it really boils down to is the fact that, is the Penn State defense up to the challenge? The last 4 weeks, the Penn State defense has not been up to the challenge. It's going to be very, very interesting to see if the team can be hyped up, knowing that they can play spoiler. Is that enough motivation here, to knowing they can upset the apple cart, that they can essentially knock Michigan out of any hope of getting into the playoff, barring some sort of miraculous, everybody gets another loss, which with this football season, who the heck knows?
Which could actually happen.
Which is a legit possibility in 2018. But is this team motivated to play defense enough to slow down this Michigan offense to be able to? And to be perfectly honest, Michigan's offense is okay, and they've played well, but they're not prolific by
Yeah.
any stretch. And so it's not an unmanageable task. But this game comes down to whether Penn State can play defense. The only other silver lining that I can find here is the fact that Penn State's offense, and this is really baffling, Penn State's offense has actually played better on the road this year than they've played at home. They are 51st in total offense at home,
Okay.
17th on the road.
Huh.
So, and that's something that you never see from a Penn State team, because normally the friendly confines of Beaver Stadium, you like playing at home. Maybe playing on the road is the best thing for this team. I don't know.
And as I maintain, the home field advantage, I'm making quote signs for you guys who are listening. The home field advantage in Ann Arbor, it's not that big of a deal. It's a lot of people, but it's in a big open bowl, and the noise actually, I mean, it's not as impressive as you might think.
And it's less intimidating than Beaver Stadium.
Yeah, by far.
For a game at the same time.
I've been both places by far.
So that's my hope, is that Penn State can find some motivation to upset the apple cart. The defense can finally come around. The offense can continue its trend of playing better on the road, and that the Nittany Lions can find some way to play spoiler in the Big Ten and pull out a win. That's my hope as a fan. The numbers, and with Michigan coming off a bye, it doesn't look good, but man, we are. Come on, do this.
We are. Yes.
Yeah, you need a we are this week.
I'd be fine. I would totally be fine with Penn State win. And Penn State is good enough to win there. However, I would say, as hard as I was on Jimmy Harbaugh and his somewhat puzzling offense earlier this season, they've improved. And it's noticeable. Shea Patterson. I still don't think Shea Patterson is the guy that everybody in Ann Arbor thought he was going to be, but he's more comfortable. He's more effective. There's a solid running game behind him. As you said, this is not a lights out Michigan offense,
right?
But it's better, and especially in the last 3 weeks. And then you add to that Michigan's defense. Michigan's defense is as good as we were led to believe, and perhaps even better. And this is a team that has turned things around in the middle to the latter part of the season. So they come into this undefeated since the opening week loss to Notre Dame. They're number 5. Penn State. It is hard to say. They have the talent. Especially offensively, they have the talent to keep up with. They have the talent to do more than just keep up with Michigan. They should outscore Michigan.
But can they stop them?
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
You're shaky against Indiana 2 weeks ago. There's no shame in being shaky, even at home against Iowa. But it is the defense that is the question. They're giving up almost 400 yards a game. They're giving up 22 points a game. And look, we're in November. When on Saturday we're in November, and we're at the point where Big Ten championship contending teams have to play defense. And trust me, I'm aware of Ohio State's shortcomings in this category as we get started with the last few weeks of the season. But that's what it feels like for Penn State too. Yeah. And so, I'm okay. Look, it's 9:53 and Michigan still sucks. But I think Michigan wins this on Saturday. Our last game, and this is our wild card game, at least at this point, for the college football playoff. Number 1, Alabama at number 3, LSU. A few years ago, we would have picked this game to be, 6-2 or something like that. These teams are, one in particular is much better on offense now than it used to be.
Yeah.
Alabama's favored by 14.5 points on the road. Whew, what do you think?
Well, and can you blame the odds makers for doing that? Because you look at this Alabama. Just go back and look at Alabama's schedule for everything they've played so far this year. Mm-hmm. And they have blown out every single team that they have played.
It doesn't matter.
It's
It doesn't matter who they
not
play.
even close. Not even close. Doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter who they played. They have not been in any sort of competition whatsoever this year. Even teams that you think are going to give them trouble. We all thought Texas A&M might be a stumbling block. Yeah, no, not really. I mean, that's just what Alabama is this year. They're putting up absolutely silly numbers on offense. 564 yards per game, 54 points per game. I mean, are you kidding? These are ACC offensive numbers, not SEC offensive numbers, right? Like, we would expect this out of a Clemson, not out of an Alabama. I mean, Tua's just got this offense rolling. They are the best offense in the country on the road. So you add all this stuff up going to Death Valley in a night game, which I'm really, really happy that this game is a night game on the road for Alabama, because this will be Alabama's first true test of the season. This is the best defense that Alabama has faced all year. And LSU ranks 22nd in total defense. And you have to say that LSU is entering this game ready to play. And that might be the one thing that it has going in its favor, is the fact that you cannot say that LSU is not battle tested. And this is an LSU team that has played. This will be the 6th team ranked in the top 25 at the time that the ball is kicked to start the game.
If you look at what you expect from LSU at the beginning of the season, and you look at the schedule, it's like, ooh man, they could have 2 or 3 losses by the time they play Alabama. So to get to where they are now, coming into this game, is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, what they've done is slightly remarkable, especially when we were talking at the beginning of the year. Like, we knew Joe Burrow was a good quarterback. We were kind of scratching our heads as to a pro-style offense in the SEC. What? Is that a thing?
Does this happen?
Does this happen? And is that the right decision? And we were questioning it all over that, and it's worked. Joe Burrow has done an amazing job running that offense, and It'll be really interesting to see how he plays against a really, really good Alabama defense. And that's probably going to be the deciding factor in this game, is how Joe Burrow can respond to an exceptional Alabama defense, knowing full well that the LSU defense has the capability of slowing down the Alabama offense, but can the LSU offense keep up? And that's the question that we really haven't seen all season, because LSU hasn't had to try to outscore anybody.
Right.
They've been able to rely on their defense to keep the game close and then be able to do what they need to do to win the football game. That's not going to work against Alabama. I think LSU can keep this close. I think this game is really, really close at the half. It wouldn't stun me if LSU has the lead at the half. They're playing at home in a hostile environment. Death Valley is one of the toughest places to play in the night game. LSU is going to keep this close in the first half. Can they hang on in the second half? I'm not so sure. I think this game is closer. It's the closest game by far that Alabama has played this year. Mm-hmm. We will find out the resilience of Tua and the Alabama offense, the adjustments that Saban makes at halftime. But again, like we say at the beginning of the year every year, until Alabama gives me a reason to put against them, I'm taking Alabama in this game.
Yeah. I will admit to being conflicted. I am pulling for LSU, as I have been all year, because you mentioned former Ohio State quarterback Joe Burrow and what he's been able to do with the Tigers this season.
Yep.
I am pulling for LSU just because I enjoy watching Alabama lose. That's always a fun bit of Schadenfreude. And I think this is actually the best shot that Alabama has to lose a game this season, besides something really freaky like a missed field goal return for a touchdown in the Iron Bowl, because who knows if that'll ever happen. But as I mentioned earlier, an LSU win this weekend would make a mess of the college football playoff process, and that would be especially bad for my team. But I think I can cheer for LSU without too much guilt, without too much worry, because I think at this point, to be completely honest, Clemson's been good enough in the last couple weeks that you look and you think maybe they can hang with Alabama.
Maybe.
And I don't see anybody else in the country being able to do that. I don't think Alabama's going to win by 2 touchdowns in this game. Because, at night game, rivalry, LSU, especially really good defense. But I don't see it. I do not feel an LSU win here. I don't. As much as I want it to happen, I don't see it this weekend. Alabama wins.
Yeah.
On the road in a really, really tough game, maybe the toughest game they have all season.
Well, and it's the coaching battle too, and I didn't even bring that up. But if you have to choose between Nick Saban and Ed Orgeron, who are you picking?
That's not a hard decision.
Exactly.
It's not a hard decision.
Yep.
Guys, you can watch the Carla and Crappy Show for the duration of the college football season. Which is getting to the good stuff right now, by searching Carla and Crappy Show on YouTube and or on Facebook. If you prefer to have Carla and Crappy in your earbuds, you'll find the podcast version at Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, as well as on your favorite social channels. If you like the show, please rate and review. If you don't, mind your own damn business, will you? Carla, any final thoughts?
So I'm going to take a little turn here because I think we've talked about enough college football games that there's enough to watch to keep you occupied. So I don't have any flying under the radar games this week, but I must raise a glass as you are sitting in my beloved hometown of Pittsburgh. Well, my beloved hometown is Erie, PA, but I spent a good portion of
You're come on.
Years. I'm a Western Pennsylvania girl at heart, and I spent most of a good chunk of my formative years in the city of champions, as it might be, and my heart has been in Pittsburgh all week. It was a tough weekend. This is the first day since everything that happened over the weekend that I have not been wearing black and gold. I literally have found that's true to my Pittsburgh roots, that I have various combinations of things that are black and yellow that I can wear in a professional setting, because that's what you do. And so I have been in black and gold nonstop since Saturday, and we're black and gold to the polls to early vote. My heart is at home, and I raise a glass to the city of Pittsburgh and say, hang in there. We are thinking about you here in Nashville. The whole country is thinking about you, and we love you.
We feel that. It's been working in the airlines business. It has been busy. It has been crazy. It has been difficult.
Yeah.
Because you're immersed in it all the time. So that's professional me. Personal me. I did not know. I have friends that I did not know who have connections to the Tree of Life synagogue, and they are struggling, and I struggle with them. But it's been very cool to hear reactions from the city, from the state, from the country, and literally we posted a thing on the website where people could leave condolences messages, and they're coming literally around the world, and that is a very cool thing to see, that this has had the effect that it has, and more importantly that it's drawn the reaction that it has. So Pittsburgh is a sports town, and more than 100 Steelers went to funerals today. Many of them live in the neighborhood. Mike Tomlin lives just a few blocks away from where the shooting happened.
Right.
So they are part of this. The other teams are part of this.
Yeah, if you haven't watched the Penguins hype video for tonight's game, they posted it on Twitter. That is, for anybody that doesn't, and I've been trying to post a little bit on my Facebook feed for, I've been out of Pittsburgh now for almost 10 years, which is crazy in and of itself. But
wow, really?
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting close to the 10-year mark. I've almost lived in Nashville as long as I lived in Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh will always be home. And, I've been trying to share on my Facebook page things and sentiments that I've seen that kind of explain the whole Pittsburgh mentality to people that don't really. It's tough, right? Unless you live there, it's really tough to explain. And the whole idea of the resiliency and the bouncing back from something like this, and that video from the Penguins. Go check their Twitter account. They posted it on Twitter. That sums it up better than anything that I have seen. and why this city, why Pittsburgh will bounce back from this and be stronger than ever.
We will repost. I will repost with the CNC show hashtag. You guys can find that. But if you've had nice things to say about Pittsburgh, or if you sent thoughts or send a message to someone from Pittsburgh this week, we appreciate it. Thank you. Cheers.
Yep. Cheers.
Carla, thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks as always.
Thank you guys. Enjoy the football this weekend. Thank you for your support of the Steel City, and we will see you back here next week. See you.